Okay, it is time for me to introduce our next speaker. She has the title of Chief Communicator, which is a cool title. That's awesome. Who has also been working with financial institutions, which I thought was not fun, but I have a feeling I'm going to learn otherwise. Maybe I'm wrong on that one.
You might be right.
A few other things that I've learned about Tabs here is very interested in why we do the things we do, which I also have an interest in, so I think that's very awesome. And may help us find our groove this evening. So here to tell us more about trusting the unknown, please welcome Tabs Cooper.
Okay. All right. I said I would do that. Great to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for the introduction. And Jason, wherever you are, thank you for the opportunity to waffle. My title is Chief Communicator, and it's kind of, I put it on my LinkedIn profile a while back, and I put it on so that the network couldn't see, because I was kind of embarrassed. It just seems like a bit of a over-the-top title. Anyway, especially as my number one fear has been public speaking. So it's very ironic. So the talk I'm going to give today is about trusting the unknown. And I need to tell all of you that I'm standing here genuinely not knowing what I'm going to speak to you about. So it was a challenge that I set myself when I came up with the title about trusting the unknown, because fundamentally I do trust the unknown. I have come to find that the unknown is actually the safest place to be. And I'm going to give you a bit of a talk about why I found that to be true. So also before, I need to let you know as well, before, like my heart's been going like this. So I just want to tell you that it's I may look very relaxed, and I actually do feel very relaxed because it feels like a very friendly crowd. But fear doesn't have to stop us, but it usually does. And I think that in lots of different ways today, people have been speaking about that. So, just to say a bit about myself, yes, my name's Tabitha Cooper. Tabs is easier for most people, so feel free to call me Tabs. I've been working in financial services for the last 18 years, which is kind of a strange one. I started in 2000, because it's not really an industry that I ever planned to get into, or that any of my friends could really relate to how or why I got into it. So basically all my experience was really around sort of IT implementations, projects, project managing, business analysis, basically change management, so implementing systems, processes, and new regulation. And I found it fascinating, actually, strangely. My background really changes, actually, I realized at a certain point in my life, is something that has been there ever since I popped out. I was born in Nigeria, in a tiny small town in Zaria, called Zaria. And then my parents moved to Kenya, and I lived in Kitale for 7 years, which is North Kenya. And then after that, my father went back to the UK, or we all went back to the UK, and then we went to Syria, and I live in Aleppo, which is somewhat destroyed right now, but a beautiful, beautiful city, and we were there for 13 years. And even while we were living in Syria, in Aleppo, I was moving around into 4 different apartments. I'm trying to remember where we were, 4 different apartments while we were there. And then once I'd been to the international school there, then we were basically sent to boarding school, which I don't know if you know what boarding school is, but it's basically you're at school and your parents are somewhere else. And then you go home in the holidays. So you'd have probably in total about 4 months holiday with your parents, and then the rest of the time you were at school. I was at school in the UK. So I guess while for me that was a completely normal situation, there's a lot of change in a life like that. And I think it kind of made sense that I would start asking the question myself, what's life about? Why are we here? And what's the purpose? And this is really a set of questions, if you like, that's dogged me. And I say dogged me because it's almost like being haunted by a question that you simply have to find the answer to. So why am I telling you my personal story? I think because it's taken me on such a journey. I'm standing here talking to you as somebody apparently who knows something. Okay, and you were expecting, I would imagine, to go away with something after I've been speaking. But I need to tell you that I've never really had a sense of actually knowing anything at all. And yet, at the same time, I know. And I don't know if you can relate to this experience, but it's like when you stand up on a stage like I am now, your mind can go blank. And you can think, oh my God, I don't know anything. And I think really what that is kind of just like the brain just goes blank because fear has completely sort of taken over your system. And it's happening right now. Okay. But the thing is, it's okay, right? And that's what I've learned is that in spite of like the sort of the turmoil, if you like, that I've sort of gone through sitting here knowing that I'm subjecting myself to the unknown and basically trusting that that there is a known something, is kind of powerful, and I think also it's something that we can all relate to. I feel very connected to everybody in this room, in spite of the fact that I have this feeling and sense that I don't know, and I feel that you're all with me. So I feel like, you are all who you are, you're all individually in your own places, but I still feel completely connected to everyone in this room and that you're connected to me. And so this kind of like, so when I'm talking about like trusting the unknown, what I'm talking about is trusting something that doesn't specifically originate here. I think that, as many businesses, like companies over the last sort of 100, 200, however many years, have celebrated intellectual intelligence and as being the way forward, but there's something missing, don't you think? We're kind of, it's like we're sort of mentally trying to work out what the next step is. We're mentally trying to kind of, come up with the exact, silver bullet that somebody mentioned earlier. But as you said, there is no silver bullet, right? We are the silver bullet, right? Who we are is the silver bullet. Right? There isn't like a mental model or plan that's going to make everything magically happen. We are. And I think that this is kind of the next step that humanity needs to take, let alone obviously our own companies. But our own companies are simply a sort of microcosm of the bigger macrocosm. And I think that we've avoided taking this next step, but I think we've come to a point now in sort of human evolution where it's absolutely critical that we do. So what I often say is that we've been very good at being human doings, but we have been crap at being human beings. Yeah? And I think that that's what I'm doing standing here, is I'm just saying it doesn't matter who you are, or like what your fear is, or what you think you can and can't do. If you just allow yourself to be, and just stand in that place where you just let like a river running through you, doesn't matter what you're feeling, then something else can happen. And what that something else is this kind of mystery of the unknown. It's kind of that unknown space, that uncharted territory that seems like it's unknown, but actually in reality, if we pay attention to it, we realize that we're all actually connected by it. We're connected by that invisible space between us. So when we talk about the universe, we think of planets. We think of sort of objects in space. But those objects in space are connected by something. Space. They're connected by space. They're connected by empty space. And then if you look at like what I understand, chemists and, physicists have come to is that even if you break down any sort of solid object, or you break down us into the sort of smallest component parts of like who we are, apparently we boil down to sort of rotating positive and negative energy particles, not even particles, just positive and negative energy. So if that's true, then what is material? What is the known? What is like the physical world that we think that we can relate to? And why is it that we're so afraid of something that is inherently a natural part of who we are, which is that unknown? So I kind of feel like the space that we're all in right now, can you feel the energy? Yeah? Can you feel like the charge of connection? So I kind of think that all the talks today have all been kind of rotating around this, trying to, we're all trying to find the words for this space. We're all sort of like trying to point to how to discover this oneness, right? Because I think, we tend to sort of gravitate towards things that we can touch because it makes us feel secure. But the problem is we're now too afraid to let go. And it doesn't make sense for me to keep holding on to this, does it, if I need to go to the toilet, right? Right? I need to actually let go in order to go somewhere else. So all I would say is to challenge yourselves every day to surrender to your worst fears. Think about what the worst thing is that could happen, and then see what actually does happen. Because my experience of like doing this every morning, I do yoga every morning, and one of the chants that I do is I won't say it in Gurumukh, but basically it just says, "May I never forget you," and the you is the biggest you. The you is kind of the universe. And basically every day, and I'm not specifically, by the way, talking about God or anything sort of religious. Not that I'm not talking about that either. I'm just talking about the unknown, whatever the unknown is. Every morning when I get up, I kind of go, I just hand it over. And I say, I don't know what today is. I don't know necessarily who I am. All I know is my experience, which is all any of us can really say. And what I found is that there's a kind of synchronicity, there's a kind of magic, right? There's a kind of magic when you allow yourself to surrender to what you don't know. Things start happening. And the thing is, the more you do it, the more the magic happens, the more synchronistic events occur, the right things happen at the right time, at exactly the right place, with exactly the right people. And that's why I say that actually if you trust the unknown, it's in fact the safest place to be. And I'm saying that as somebody who, when they were 13 years old at boarding school, because I was new at this new school I was going to, was told, yes, you have to, everyone has to like do a speech for their house, because we were divided up into houses. And so I had to, and I was told I had to, and of course I didn't realize that I didn't have to. They were just telling me to do that because no one else wanted to do it, and I was too stupid to know, or naive to know differently. So I wrote a big long story. No one tells you how to like do a speech and whatever. And I thought I was supposed to memorize everything, write it down on a piece of paper, and it was about this eagle flying around, looking at the devastation that somehow the planet had caused its home. And it was a very heartfelt speech, and I had it down there, and all I could do was remember the first paragraph, and even then I was kind of struggling. And I was standing there with like a room of like about a similar number of people, of girls, going like this, trying to read it. And at the end, the person who was introducing me, I said, I can't do this, I can't do this. She said, yes, you can, yes, you can. I said, no, I can't. And it was the most humiliating experience of my life. So ever since then, standing up on stage has just been my like worst possible thing, apart from spiders, that I could do. So I mean, what I'm trying to say is that if I can do this, I promise you, you can too. And I don't mean standing up on stage, but whatever it is that your dream is, and whatever it is that you want to change, you just need to kind of have faith in something bigger. something, faith not necessarily in you, but something bigger, but recognizing that that something bigger is you. So I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you very much. I don't and maybe, I don't know how much time we have. 15, awesome, cool. Well, if that's the case, then I just wanted to ask, is there anybody here who sort of feels particularly like they know what I'm talking about when I talk about that space?
What's interesting is what you brought up about the energy. And I'm going to go a little science theory on you. It's quantum physics. And when that really is deep, very much so, especially when everything that we are made of is made of energy. So there is, even when our intuition tells us something, it's the energy between us that is telling us what that is. So knowing that there is a space, you know when you see someone, you're just like, not that. There's a reason, right? You just don't like them because they're their colors or whatever. There is something within that sphere. With what you're talking about, there's been a lot of hype around the power of positive thinking. That's all of this. You believe in it? It's a frequency. And that's what we admit as humans. Because we are essentially living that energy, we are emitting, with the atom, subatomic particle. Subatomic particle is just enough energy. So I totally am picking up what you're talking about.
Yeah, totally picking up. I love that. I love some of the Canadian stroke American phrases. It's brilliant. I should give everyone my email address. But sorry, just in terms of like the positive and negative, in terms of energy, the other thing I kind of wanted to say about it is that it is a choice. And I think that's just the thing to recognize. It's like, do we want to choose to kind of be in that flow or not? And I just think if you look at life, everything's a kind of polarity. And when I was trying to really understand, like, what is the point of living? Why are we here? It sort of feels like it isn't about, and people say this, it isn't about the destination, it's about the journey. It's about the getting there. So if it is about the getting there, if it's not about the getting there, but it's the journey, then what does that mean about how we live? Right? And what does it mean about the fact that we seem to exist within these kind of polarities of hot and cold, up and down, black and white, solid, vapor? There's so many different sort of polarities that we seem to, as human beings, exist within. It surely then means that it's about the level of awareness with which we navigate that journey. And which is why then it always comes back to who we are. Did you have something that you wanted to say? And then
so when you completely slowed down, and I think you brought the room to an almost standstill. We could even hear the noise outside in the kitchen. Right? When you brought it so slow, I was reminded of you were talking about unknown, and then you said you submit to the you. So you also stands for the unconscious. And I was reminded of two types of unconscious. One is the personal unconscious, which is just with you or with me or with one of us. And then the larger unconscious is the collective unconscious. That's what I was reminded of. And for a human being or any being, sentient being, to connect to the personal and then the collective unconscious, you need a muse. I saw you as a muse to help all of us connect into that with silence.
Oh. Thank you. I wasn't expecting a compliment or asking for one, but thank you. I feel very British right now. Does anyone else have any not necessarily complimentary? Okay, great. I'm just going through to Dave. Unless you feel you can project from there. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering if you want to share any tips for overcoming your fear. You've overcome a lot of fear. Do you have any thoughts for those of us who are living still in fear or want to get over that? Do you have that helps you get over your fears?
I think for me, I can only tell my own story, right? But it's going to be different for everyone. But I think I just felt kind of pissed off about being a girl for a long time. And it pissed me off that it was so unfair. That It's basically, a guy's world. And I felt like I didn't want to be limited. I didn't want to feel limited, and I didn't want to be limited by other people. And I guess to a certain extent there was an element of anger, that kind of propelled. Yeah, there was a warrior kind of inside that was just like, F you, that was just more belligerent than the fear. And I think that still holds true. So while I was sitting there listening to the talks, it's just, you've no idea. Like, I was just like thinking, okay, I feel nauseous now, right? Okay. And then it's just like, my heart's going to stop. And I was just thinking, okay. So, I don't know. I think it's just, maybe it's kind of belligerence or a kind of unwillingness to be limited by myself or anyone else. And as I said, I've never had this sense of knowing anything, but I always felt like there was something to know, but not in a way that I could or anyone else could necessarily be in control of.
Thanks, Tabitha. So I know this wasn't your whole message, but just one little thing that I got out of it. I was just at a company, not anymore, but just recently, and there was this huge thing that they put millions into. And then after a year, they were like, okay, let's have a Six Sigma guy come in and we'll figure out what the heck is wrong with this big thing, right? And, for 3 days or whatever, everyone's sitting in a room and they have to follow the process to try and uncover all the things that are wrong. And instead of, we are the silver bullet, let's trust ourselves, everyone follows the process. And at the end, there's this bullshit report, excuse the language, everyone, but there's this report that's got nothing to do with anything that anyone in the room thinks, because nobody realized that we know what's wrong and how to fix it, but we've got so hamstrung about whose 4-step process is right or whose 5-step process needs to be followed. We forget that we actually might know what's happening. So I'm going to take away just to trust us as individuals, including myself, when we're trying to figure out what to do next.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's really, really such a great observation, and I can't support what you say more. I think, if I think about what it's like working in a corporate environment, I feel like I'm constantly like the weirdo who just thinks that this is all wrong and that I have to say it. And I think, oh my God, why did I just say that? But I think that maybe, that those are the moments that it takes courage, to kind of really, it's not courage to do something you don't know. It's actually the courage to do what you do know, right? But what you do know isn't in the process. It isn't in the manual necessarily. It's in your heart, exactly. But I think that's the sort of the journey. I think for the corporate environment is actually what it is that we trust needs to include our own humanity. And I think that we've somehow, I think by accident, just ended up celebrating the IQ, and we've forgotten about the EQ, which is just another way of saying intelligence, intellectual intelligence over our emotional intelligence. So I fully agree. I think and that's why I think we were talking about soul before. It is actually something very simple and very human that will bring about the change. And I think that's what all of the speakers have been pointing to in their talks.
I don't need a microphone.
Okay. No, you don't.
I'm wondering, Tabitha, in your experience, if you can provide any insight as to how to address an organization that's talking about, okay, I've got 5 minutes, that's good.
I love that. Take it away. My job is done.
But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, in your experience or observations, how we take what we know inherently and what's in our hearts, and how we address an organization that tells me that that's unscalable. How do I take what I know and what's in my heart and what I don't know or what I think I might know, and how do I scale that to an organization of 10, 20, 30,000 people so that I can make it repeatable and it can go beyond me and the 10 people that I interact with?
Yeah, obviously that is a challenge. I think people have spoken about networks, influencers, I think that no change is really ever done alone, and I think a part of it is kind of you have to stand behind your belief, but I think also you need to find a way to use a language that the people that you're trying to convince will understand. Yeah, so it's taking your belief and translating it into something that doesn't cause them to want to reject what you're saying as a foreign body. So like, when I talk about, culture change, I talk about a process called the U journey, which is Otto Scharmer's U-Lab. I love it because it's a process. It gives people something to latch onto. It's an intellectual way of introducing a process that is, in fact, just simply about allowing yourself to feel. But it does it in such a way that's, it's kind of methodical. It's got stages. It's got, ways to interpret, etc. So language, yeah, sure. Are you good, or have we got time for one more, if anyone? Okay. Oh.
Can you hear me?
Oh. Okay, cool.
That thing you said, I don't know if you created it or it came from somewhere else, but I love the thing about being really, we're really good at human doing, but not human being. That's like seared into my brain. Why are we really good at, I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, I'm good. I've got an answer.
Yeah. I'm putting you on the spot right now. Why is that the way that it's ended up, and what do we do about it?
I think that it's kind of neuroscience-based. I first of all just think it's easier, right, in a way. Partly because it's easier to do, right, because you don't have to sort of reflect on yourself. I think there was a time in history, like in the sort of 1,000 years ago, the yogis, they understood. That yoga was a one practice. It wasn't just Astanga, which is like an exercise. It was actually a whole way of life. So they really understood how the body works. They understood a lot of secrets about the body. But I think, we've sort of ended up forgetting that. And I think from a... Okay, so I'm going to get a little political unintentionally here, but I think that in business is something that has been created by men. Yeah, and I think that men, seems to be, in most cultures, have been conditioned to believe that feeling is weak. If business is being created, by a mindset of like not allowing feeling to be, then of course it makes complete sense, why businesses have kind of inadvertently become psychopathic. We're sort of where if you don't allow the people to trust themselves, if you don't allow them to feel, then of course, it doesn't matter how you feel, therefore, it only matters what you do. I was actually in a cult where the leader, actually that's what he would say. He said, it doesn't matter what you think, it doesn't matter what you feel, it only matters what you do. But I think that's just a kind of, that's what society kind of has unconsciously ended up indoctrinating in our businesses. So I think that yoga really is like a practice that helps kind of harmonize sort of thought, feeling, emotion, body, etc. To yoke everything. Basically, that's what yoga is. And I've found on my journey that I've also, like everyone else, just sort of prioritized the intellectual part of myself and completely ignored my emotional side. So I think that I find that I've become more of a human being by allowing myself to feel and giving myself a break. And I think that one of the ways that we can kind of help influence and change our organizations is by allowing ourselves to be ourselves. Thank you.
All right, keep it going for Tabs.